You're here, just as I predicted. Welcome back. Don't you just love predictability? You can always count on me to show up right on time, and you always know what to expect from me. I'm Menopause Taylor, educating you about all things pertaining to menopause. Currently, we're addressing peri-menopause. And even though we all love predictability, peri-menopause is a time when all predictability disappears. And if there's no predictability, how will you recognize perimenopause when it arrives? That's what I'll discuss today. This is video tutorial number 474. And it's all about how to recognize perimenopause if you're still having periods. Obviously, the vast majority of women will endure all of perimenopause while they are still having periods. This is because the very definition of post-menopause is when you have your very last period. So the goal of this tutorial is to ensure that you recognize perimenopause when it arrives while you're still having periods. Don't worry, next week I'll present a tutorial on how to recognize perimenopause if for any reason you no longer have periods. You will find this material in a more abbreviated form in various parts of chapters 3 and 4 of my book. Okay, so let's set the stage for what we will discuss today. If you're still having periods when you start perimenopause, you'll find yourself in one of three situations. Either one, you have no symptoms but start having less predictable periods. Or two, you'll continue to have predictable periods, but you'll start having symptoms of progesterone deficiency and or estrogen deficiency. Or three, you'll have less predictable periods plus symptoms of progesterone deficiency and or estrogen deficiency. Let me say from the start that your age is irrelevant. Perimenopause can start at any age. Do not believe anybody who tells you that you're too young to experience perimenopause. Very commonly, after getting my education, women realize that they've been perimenopausal since their 30s. They just had no idea what perimenopause was, so they suffered needlessly. I never want you to suffer. So let's go through these three scenarios one by one and determine how you know you've become perimenopausal. Okay, here is our Play-Doh graph of what happens when you transition from premenopause to perimenopause. As you can see, perimenopause is when your progesterone, the multicolored line, starts disappearing long before your estrogen in pink starts disappearing. And this process during which they both completely disappear can take 2 to 10 years. That entire 2 to 10 year period of time is what we call perimenopause. The entire 2 to 10 years. Your estrogen and progesterone together controlled two broad aspects of your life: your periods and your sense of well-being with no symptoms of progesterone or estrogen deficiency. Well, in this 2 to 10 year period of time, during which both your estrogen and progesterone become disrupted, those same two aspects of your life will become disrupted. Your periods and your sense of well-being with symptoms of progesterone or estrogen deficiency. And no woman can predict how the process of perimenopause will transpire for her. We are all different. It doesn't matter how it transpires for anybody else. Do not expect yours to be like your mother's. Do not expect yours to be like your sister's, even if you're identical twins. Do not expect yours to be like your friends. So let's start with our first scenario. You have no symptoms, but start having less predictable periods. If this is the case, you'll just start having periods that are different from those you've had during your premenopausal life. I tend to call them wacky periods. They may become more irregular. Instead of every 28 days like clockwork, they may come at varying intervals, anywhere between every 21 and every 35 days. So they may be more frequent or they may be less frequent. Each period may last a longer time than usual. Instead of bleeding for 4 days, you may bleed for 6 days. Alternatively, each period may last a shorter time than usual. Instead of bleeding for 4 days, you may bleed for just 3 days. It's more common at perimenopause for your periods to last a longer time than it is for them to last a shorter time. Your periods may get heavier. You may notice that you have to change pads or tampons much more often. You might even have some extremely heavy periods. Alternatively, your periods may get lighter. You may notice that you have to change pads or tampons much less often. And finally, you may skip periods, and this is the most common occurrence. And you can skip periods in combination with any of the other changes I just described. In fact, any combination of these things is possible. Irregular, longer, heavier, and skipped periods. Irregular, shorter, lighter, and skipped periods. Longer and lighter, shorter and heavier. Anything is possible. But the one thing that is not acceptable is bleeding between periods. It's the one deal breaker as an indicator of peri-menopause. So if you have your regular, longer, shorter, heavier, or lighter periods, you can assume it's peri-menopause. If you have bleeding between periods, you cannot. Well then, the next question becomes, where do we draw the line between more frequent periods and bleeding between periods? And the magic number is 21 days. If your periods are more frequent than every 21 days, you have bleeding between periods, and that warrants an evaluation. Now, why do you suppose your periods can get wacky at perimenopause? Remember, your entire menstrual cycle occurred as a result of estrogen and progesterone acting in a perfectly coordinated manner. In the first half of your menstrual cycle, your estrogen was high. It served to thicken the inner lining of your uterus. You can think of the inner lining of your uterus as grass, and estrogen was the fertilizer for the grass. So estrogen made the grass grow. And then, in the second half of your menstrual cycle, your progesterone was high. Its only role was to keep the grass thick in order to form a cushion for a baby should you get pregnant. But when you didn't get pregnant, progesterone made the cushion disappear. So it made the inner lining of your uterus get thin. So progesterone was like a lawnmower. It mowed the lawn. Well, along comes peri-menopause, which completely disrupts this relationship between the fertilizer and the lawnmower. So your inner uterine lining gets too thick, or it stays too thin. In other words, the grass grows too much or not enough, and you end up with an imbalance between the fertilizer and the lawnmower. And the timing of when the lawn gets mowed becomes wonky. So you can have all sorts of wacky changes in your period even though you feel fine in every other way. Well, what about our second scenario? You continue having predictable periods, but start having symptoms of progesterone deficiency or estrogen deficiency. So you notice any or all of the following: PMS, anxiety, heart palpitations, hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, fatigue, forgetfulness, mood swings, irritability, depression, joint pain and stiffness, dry skin, hair loss, vaginal dryness, urinary incontinence, urinary tract infections, weight gain, decreased sex drive, headaches, nausea, vomiting, leg cramps, yeast infections, drowsiness, cravings, breast tenderness, and bloating. Well, remember, the very definition of peri-menopause is chaos. So your progesterone and estrogen do not decrease in a steady, predictable, linear manner. Instead, they are both up and down, constantly changing, putting your entire life on a roller coaster of symptoms. So you have some of these symptoms some of the time, but there's no pattern. And because there's no pattern, you might fail to recognize them as symptoms of peri-menopause. If certain symptoms come and go, you're likely to make the mistake of thinking that your hormones were just temporarily out of balance. When the symptoms go away for a while, you may think they're gone forever. Well, the symptoms are not gone forever, but soon your estrogen and progesterone will be gone forever. And recall that the time frame over which all of this is happening is 2 to 10 years. That long time frame is another reason that you might fail to recognize this as indicative of peri-menopause. Most women spend years going from doctor to doctor for each of these symptoms before they connect the dots and realize that they are all just one thing: peri-menopause. There's no way to predict any of this. It's as unpredictable and as uncomfortable as puberty. That's why I call it puberty in reverse. And then there's our third scenario. You have less predictable periods plus symptoms of progesterone deficiency and or estrogen deficiency. This is just a combination of the first two scenarios, and it's the most common of the three. So you can have periods and still be low on estrogen and progesterone. You can have no symptoms and still be low on estrogen and progesterone. Anything is possible. Now, you might be thinking, my goodness, why not just get a lab test to diagnose perimenopause? And that is an option, but here's the problem. By definition, perimenopause is a time of complete hormonal chaos. So both your estrogen and progesterone are wildly crazy from day to day. If you were to have your estrogen and progesterone levels drawn every day of your menstrual cycle and then plotted them on a graph, here's what you'd see. Estrogen is in orange, progesterone is in blue, but it really doesn't matter which is which because they're both completely chaotic. Which snapshot in time tells you what's really going on? None of them. This is why I tell you that labs for your estrogen and progesterone hormone levels are worthless. Save your time, blood, and money. Skip the labs. This is also why estrogen and progesterone levels are not diagnostic tests for perimenopause. So while most people tell you to just get a lab test in order to know when you become perimenopausal, I tell you to just get my education in order to know when you become perimenopausal. But there actually is a diagnostic test for post-menopause. Be sure you understand that I said it's a diagnostic test for post-menopause. Not perimenopause, post-menopause. It's follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. I taught you about it ages ago. You might remember this prop. FSH is produced by your brain, and its job is to speak to your ovaries in order to get them to produce estrogen. If your ovaries do produce estrogen, then your FSH stays nice and low. The value stays between 2 and 15 milli-international units per milliliter. But if your ovaries do not produce estrogen, your FSH rises. So at post-menopause, your FSH level rises to over 30 milli-international units per milliliter, and it stays high for the rest of your life. But we are not talking about post-menopause today. We're talking about peri-menopause. Well, what's going to happen to your FSH if your estrogen level is crazily chaotic from day to day? Well, your FSH is going to be crazily chaotic too. If you were to draw your FSH level every day or every week or every month during peri-menopause, it would look like this. So the question becomes, which one of those represents your reality? All of them. Remember, your FSH is reacting to the behavior of your estrogen. If your estrogen is chaotic, then your FSH is chaotic. And there's nothing linear or predictable about either one of them. It just doesn't make sense to rely on an unreliable lab value. Each lab value is a snapshot in time, but your life is the collective result of all these values. Your FSH and your entire life are in complete chaos. Again, this is why I tell you that it is completely unnecessary and illogical to utilize labs to diagnose peri-menopause. The key to all this is simply to recognize peri-menopause for what it is when it arrives. And that's the biggest problem of all for the vast majority of women. Why? Because menopause is the most neglected topic on earth. Most women have never heard anything about menopause. Most women refuse to talk about menopause. Most women have no education on menopause. There is no education on menopause in medical school at all. 4-year obstetrics and gynecology residency programs devote only 1% of the time to menopause. So both women and their doctors are clueless when peri-menopause starts creating all sorts of chaos. This is precisely what I'm trying to improve with this education. I see no reason that any woman has to suffer in any way for even a minute. The eventual arrival of perimenopause is inevitable. So why aren't women prepared for it? You need to anticipate eventual wacky periods and or eventual symptoms of progesterone deficiency and or estrogen deficiency. And when you start noticing them, accept the fact that you have entered peri-menopause, and then you can decide how or if you want to manage it. And if you want me to help you, just schedule a consultation with me at menopausetailor.me. Do not waste a bunch of time spinning your wheels and shooting in the dark. Know what to expect and accept it when it comes your way. You will have many management options, and you know that I'll present them all in future videos. If you have a consultation with me, I will tailor everything to your specific situation. You'll know precisely what's happening to you, and you'll know all your options for dealing with it. All the decisions and choices are yours. So your summary is this. At peri-menopause, all of the following are possible. 1, you can have no symptoms, but start having less predictable periods. 2, you can continue having predictable periods, but start having symptoms of progesterone deficiency and or estrogen deficiency. Or 3, you can have less predictable periods plus symptoms of progesterone deficiency and or estrogen deficiency. Of course, you may no longer have periods when you start perimenopause. What then? Well, that's what we'll address next week. Please go to menopausetailor.me to schedule a consultation so that I can tailor everything specifically to the one and only you. It's the only way to get the tailoring. All the videos in the world will not tailor the information specifically to you. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and to my newsletter before you leave today, and please follow me on social media. Until next week, bye, my dear students.